Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the second episode of the Winning in Professional Services podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Scott Presimon. Hey, Scott, how are you?
Hey, good to see you, Mateo.
Hey. So today, actually, before we started recording this podcast yesterday night, I was thinking maybe I should just treat this podcast as a little experiment just to ease my sort of anxiety of speaking to the camera and here with you. But ultimately, I really think that we both committed to recording this podcast because we really want to practice what we preach. And I feel like we have accumulated quite a bit of experience ourselves, respectively, over the past decade or so, working with professional service companies. And really, the goal of the podcast and also of this episode really is about demystifying some of the issues that professional service company face when it comes to marketing, business choices, growth challenges, and whatnot. And there's one particular thing that I was thinking about this specific episode that I wanted to address, and that is that professional service companies are in many ways very different from other types of service companies. And I was thinking about software as a service company. And it might seem very obvious that professional service companies and SaaS companies are different. I really think that the biggest difference in my mind is that a professional service company is in the business of selling their own expertise, whereas a software as a service company is in the business of selling a product. And I guess the idea behind this is really that in a professional service company client relationship, the client is in most cases taking on a lot of the risk of getting into this partnership with the professional service company because they don't really have a lot of opportunity to trial the services the professional service company is selling as much as you could trial a SaaS tool, right? You can have a free trial for a couple of weeks. If you like it, you sign up for an entire month or a year. If not, you can just go out and find a different tool that does maybe the same thing. And so what happens here in a professional service company client relationship setting is that the professional service company, in my opinion, has to be aware of this dynamic that goes on into the prospective client's mind, use that to their advantage to make sure that they are able to demonstrate their expertise as much as possible ahead the client signing up for one of their services. The knowledge sharing exercise can happen even after the sale in some cases, but what we're really focusing on today are the three biggest questions clients or prospective clients ask themselves before signing up with a professional service company. The reason they're asking themselves these questions is because the professional service company's services are high value. It's not really about, spending a few $100s on a certain service. It's potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of multiple months of years. So yeah, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on this pretty much long introduction, and maybe we can just start diving into the first question that we have today.
Yeah, it's a great point. And when you mentioned how SaaS is different, in a way, SaaS is very, software as a service companies have it very easy in the sense that if they're offering something that's very good, they could offer a free trial. And I've had clients ask me, well, Scott, what do I do as a professional services firm because I can't offer a free trial? And the hard truth of that is there really isn't an easy solution to that, in that even if you're offering some guarantee, you're saying, oh, there's a money back guarantee, that's a great thing to offer, I mean, honestly, to get over a barrier, but it still is not quite enough. Because to your point, even if you're essentially a client, you're coming and being invited into the client's house, right? And if you're coming in, they need to trust you enough to invite you in the door. You still invited them in to the door. And so that is a very vulnerable place to be. And so there's the time, there's the trust, all these things have to be built up before the door is open. And so there's no such thing as a free trial in this situation. So to your point, I think that leads us into the questions that we have to answer for these individuals to help gain that trust and to help them engage with us as professional services firms. So the first one was, what do we provide and what's in it for the audience? So what's in it for them? So think of it this way, in that when they're first coming to a website, you have to very precisely answer that question so there's no confusion about what it is that you provide and how it's going to benefit them. If you can't do this and there's any sort of confusion, you don't make it to the following steps. So, Matteo, what is your thought on how we could more effectively answer that question of what's in it for the audience?
I would say, first and foremost, we should think more in terms of the outcomes, in terms of benefits of the service that we are providing to our customers. I think as professional service business owners in our fields, we are fairly technical when it comes to the services that we sell, and we think of the service as the list of deliverables sometimes that we are selling to the client, and that we also think, oh, that's what the client is getting, right? Ultimately, the client doesn't really care about the document that you are sending them at the end of the engagement or at the end of each month, the report. That's just a formality in most cases. What they really care about is the outcome. How is that service that you're selling to them going to help them grow as a business or as an individual within a business? And so it's really more about trying to focus as much as possible on the tangible and intangible benefits of the services we're selling. I'll pass it back to you. Do you have any potential examples of how a company could lean on more on the benefit aspects of their services rather than on the features?
Yeah, I think a good example of this would be if you're, let's say you do taxes, you're a tax consultancy or tax advisor, right? Then you could say that you do taxes. That's the actual thing that you do. You could say maybe the speed at which you do it. You could say the price at which you do it. These are just the facts-based things. And again, if you're a logical individual or more of a technical individual, as Matteo, you said, these are going to be the things that we're going to be thinking of that are top of mind, where it's like, let me just say that thing. Let me say that credential. Let me say that fact or that feature. Now, to turn that into benefits, though, if you're going to a tax professional, the benefit that that customer is getting from you is that their taxes are done and their mind's at ease, right? And so it's this fear that you're getting rid of the fear that they're going to be audited, or you're someone that's on their side. If they ever are audited, now they have someone on their team that's there to defend them. And so these are more emotional things. These are more feels, but that is how people think, right? But in reality, people tend to rationalize the decisions they made emotionally based off those more feel words of saying, what is it? How is it going to help me feel, right? How much do I believe the benefit that you're portraying somewhere on your website is going to make me feel at the end of the day if I go with you? So do you have any other examples of benefits?
Actually, I just wanted to add a little bit of an idea about getting into the client's mind through their feelings towards the service that you're selling. And really, the idea behind it is that you have to know who you are selling your services to. Just have a very clear idea about what their fears, frustrations, and aspirations are. And just by doing that, you are going to be able to speak their language better, and your message is going to resonate better with them rather than trying to appeal to a wider audience with more generic messaging. Maybe this goes more into our second questions we're going to cover later. But yeah, I just wanted to put this out there. We're talking about benefits and how to get to the point where we're able to speak at that level where the customer feels that we're really speaking to them. I think just nailing or learning more about their personalities and their goals and aspirations is going to get us there a little easier.
No, it's really, I totally agree with you, Matteo. And I know that this can seem like a buzzword. I'm going to say it anyway. But if you heard of the term buyer persona or ICP or some of these other kind of marketing terms, I think it's easy to have that scare you away if you've had a bad opinion of those things. Maybe you've been told by someone to go through this process of creating one of these people and knowing who you're speaking to. And in that case, it's probably not getting a lot of benefit, right? But as you said, you have to know who you're speaking to. So whatever exercise you go through, whether you write it on paper or you go through a more formal exercise, get in the mind of your buyer. They don't know your company, they don't know you, they don't trust you. So you have to be so clear about who you're speaking with before you begin speaking to them. I love that you said that point there because it's hard to do the following steps if you don't know who you're speaking to.
Absolutely. And yes, this honestly leads us to the second question, which is, do I like and trust this company? This company that is either approaching me cold or that I find through my own research, right? We know that prospective customers do their own sort of due diligence for a good portion of the buyer's journey. And what they're really trying to figure out is whether you speak their own language, but also if you convey trust through the words you say on your website or the marketing material that you put out to talk about your own expertise. This is exactly what we are doing here, Scott and I. We're talking about things we feel very passionate about and things that we know we can provide value on. In your opinion, Scott, is there any particular way that companies should be considering to building that trust with a prospective client, like we said before, that gets invited in your own house, and then what to do next? How do we build that trust over time?
Yeah, the trust could be through specialization and understanding. So you'd mentioned before, know who you're talking to. But to give a tangible example, if you're servicing a certain industry or a certain sector, you need to speak their language. You need to have things that are showing that you actually do understand them. Because if you're saying that you do all these great things, but you're not thinking about the certifications or the other things that they care about most, then there's no way to really build that trust. So I think the trust comes from the understanding and the speaking their language. That could mean, let's say you're servicing more than one industry. And I would argue there is a benefit of narrowing down and getting more focused with your overall offering, but it can be a lot to do that. If you're servicing a bunch of industries today, I'm not suggesting that tomorrow you start only servicing one. But within a website or some of your marketing collateral, you could have segment things out so that you have a page on your site that is talking specifically about that industry, and you're demonstrating your expertise and how they feel. Because just remember, we have to position it in terms of benefits and not features. So instead of saying we do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and we even service your industry, look at us here, we have a logo of people in your industry here, it's like that's not quite enough. It's like you have to go several layers deeper to actually be presenting in a way that shows and actually demonstrates. You're not just saying I understand your industry, you're demonstrating that you know their industry but do you have any kind of ideas of specifically how companies have done that, Matteo?
I would say just being able to speak to your prospective customers and hear the way they speak about the problems they have could be a very good way to get in the mind of the customer. And then using those exact word choices that your prospective customer use while you have conversations with them on your marketing material, on your website, or even your salespeople get trained to use that same sort of terminology that your prospective customers use during those conversations with the customer. I feel like customers will feel like you truly understand their issues. And I think that we're not really trying to say that you only need to service one industry and one industry only. But obviously, the more narrow your focus is, the higher your understanding of that particular segment is going to be. Your resources are limited anyway. Just knowing that if we are talking to professional service companies, it's not one type of company within the professional service segment. If we were to create a website around professional service companies, we would try to create separate industry pages. We wouldn't try to target every professional service company under the sun. We would focus only on a certain type of professional service company, maybe technology focused or health related professional service companies. If I were to say, I need my website to be faster, I know my website is slow. If my website is slow and I need to find someone who's good at speeding up my website, I could find someone who on their homepage says, I can speed up your WordPress website by 2x. And then another service provider who could say, I can fix your website issues. It's more likely for me to go with option one after having done my due diligence on their type of services, just because they speak very clearly to the problem I have today, which is website speed rather than website issues in general. So yeah, just trying to figure out exactly what you're trying to accomplish with your services and try to figure out exactly what the issue your prospective client has.
Yeah, I'd even add to that example, since you're talking about websites, you mentioned being specialized. So if there's a specialization there and it's fixing site speed or something like that, you also before had mentioned using a benefit rather than a feature. So it could even be expanded on rather than saying site speed. Why are you helping them with site speed? Yeah. I'm sure someone doesn't want the fastest website. They probably care about whether it's search rankings or other things like that. So obviously that company, if they're expanding on that and the benefit to their end customers and they're specialized, now they've got it all. Now, another thing that comes to mind with some of that messaging. So let's say that we're pitching the benefit. We are helping someone gain trust in what we're offering. I think another thing that we didn't really touch on, Matteo, is specifically how we use the words. So I think we've often gone to people's marketing collateral and things like this, and we hear the term I, we, right? And I think a simple way to turn this around is in some of those words, flip the script a little bit. Speak instead in terms of you. And I think one of the really extreme examples of this that I like to use is if your website is speaking more to the audience and speaking in their language to them rather than just bragging about the things that you do, well, think even about the About Us page of a website. That's an area where you say, well, surely that's where we talk about us. We talk about why I was passionate about the business, why I started the business, why this, why that. But I would say even the About Us shouldn't really be about you. It should be about them. Because really what that audience and what your clients are thinking about is not about you. They're thinking about how the About Us benefits them, right?
Yeah.
And so your years of experience might matter to them. Your personality traits or the things you care about might benefit them, but you really have to make sure you're keeping it as targeted as possible to every word on that page as much as possible has a way that you could spin it to how it's benefiting them. Your years of experience are benefiting them. The team size you have, how is that benefiting them, right? The reader of your website or your intended audience.
100%. Yeah, I agree. And I think this type of messaging and the way we communicate to clients can happen in a variety of places. It can happen online on your website. It can happen on your social media pages. It can happen through emails. It can happen over a phone call with a prospect. So it's really more about making sure that everyone who has a contact with prospective clients is aware of these dynamics and makes sure that they're as much as possible not talking about how great your company is and all that type of stuff, but more about how good of a job you can do for them to let them achieve the goals that they want to achieve. And I think that will certainly make your points come across much easier.
I know sometimes we use examples of marketing, but I love the idea that you're mentioning there about a salesperson because I know I'm by no means a sales expert, but I think that I have listened to call recordings of salespeople and given advice and done some consulting in that area too. And it does make me cringe a little bit when sometimes you listen to a sales recording and the salesperson is talking a lot about the company and they're not letting the prospective client speak. Because I would argue, just think about the big benefit you have. If you're on a sales call with someone, you can ask questions, right? And so on a website or on collateral, you have to kind of guess who they are and you have to try to position yourself in that. But it's a website or it's a page or it's a brochure. And so you have to hope that you give the right brochure to the right person to make it work. But in a two-way conversation, like a sales conversation, that's where you can ask a ton of questions. And if the salesperson is not absorbing what that user wants, what they care about, if they're not listening, right, then there's no way that they can change their messaging and position it, right? So you don't want to say on a sales call, oh, we're the best at this, we're the best at that, we've had this many years in the business. 90% of the call should be, what are you trying to achieve? What's your issue? What would you say about this? Well, how would you feel if ... right? And then it's a beauty that you can actually adapt that messaging. One thing, Mateo, you mentioned briefly that we're getting on camera. It's not always fun to get on camera, right? But I do think that we need to turn this and say that there's a benefit to get yourself out there as well. Because the whole point of this second point we were talking about is, do I like and trust this company? Do I like and trust the leadership of this company? And it's really important to not just be using stock imagery, stock photos, stock videos, because how are they going to know what it's like working with you? How are they going to know if they should be invited into your house and they're going to actually want to be invited into your house if they don't know who you are? And so ways to do that, of course, are to get your face out there more, your name out there more, your voice out there more. And chances are that some people are not going to like you.
Oh yeah, and it's okay, right? It's fine if people don't like you. The goal isn't to be likable to everyone. The goal is to find the narrow type of prospect that you want to work with and try to be likable to them.
You mentioned at the start of this episode the idea of free trials with a SaaS business and that we can't do free trials. Getting yourself out there ahead of it, right, before they're working with you, so they actually know what it's like working with you. They know what you stand for. They know how you talk. They know how you treat your team. All of these things, that is the way a professional services team is able to give a free trial to prospective clients, because you're showing them and demonstrating to them exactly what it's like and who you are up front before they're actually working with you. And again, that's the beauty of video. I honestly highly value video for that reason, just because it's the closest way to have a very low risk for them, because I'll use this again, they're not coming to your house for an appointment. They're not coming to your business for an appointment. You're not going to their business for an appointment. That hasn't happened yet. So they're not risking physical time and effort and whatever. Instead, they're getting exposed to you ahead of time, which sort of leads into the next thing that you have to answer, which is how do you get started and what happens next? So what do you think about this, Matteo? We've talked about how it's important that a prospective client knows what it is that you offer and what's in it for them, so they know the benefits. It's important that they know, like, and trust you. And we can do that through video. We can do that by sharing a lot on the website and other material and in the sales calls. Then again, the third point is going to be, if I want to engage with you, if I want to get started, how do I do that and what happens next?
Yeah.
So how do you think a professional service firm can do that effectively?
I would say there's a very simple way to achieve this through different channels on your website, on emails, on marketing collateral that you print out and give away to prospects, is by using a visual representation of sort of the first 30 to 60 days after the client signs up for a service with you, and just give them a very clear idea of what they should expect from the point that they sign on the dotted line to the point where they get their first phone call or their first email, and everything that happens from that point on. Really, I can imagine in most cases for professional service companies that maybe the first 30 or 60 days are the most intense, where the client gets onboarded, where a lot of information gets extracted from the client. And so try to represent that visually or into a bullet point or a step-by-step list and give that to the client, because ultimately what the client doesn't want is to be left wondering after they signed up for your service and paid with their credit card of what's going to happen next. You want to make that clear ahead of time, because after the sign up has happened, they don't really have much control over what you're going to do, right? So you want to be as clear as possible. Try to lead up the tunnel in front of them. Almost imagine them entering a dark room and waiting for instruction on how to move. And what happens 5 minutes after I paid? What happens 1 day after I paid? And 3 days, depending on when your engagement with the client is going to start to become more of a routine. You don't have to show them all the way to, what happens 1 year after they signed up, but I would say the first 30 to 60 days could be the most critical ones to set, the right tone of the relationship with a new client.
Yeah, it's easy to fall into the trap of not wanting to over-explain and saying, oh, of course, after they submit a contact form, this is going to happen next. But I think we can't assume, because, as you pointed out, Matteo, they are going into a dark room that they don't know anything. They have no idea what's in that room. They have no idea. And so you have to over-explain to the point that it almost seems silly. Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned that this could be what's happening the first 30 days of an engagement, the first 90 days of an engagement. So we could share all that. But even to start off simply, it could be after submitting a form, what happens next. It could be after submitting an inquiry form, what happens next. It could be, anything. It's like, what are you going to do with my email address? How soon is someone going to contact me? And in fact, since you mentioned SaaS earlier, Matteo, I think this is something we could actually learn from SaaS companies, because I think SaaS companies, like, their downside and their challenge becomes they can get a lot of free trials, right? And so it's easy to get people in the door of a SaaS company because the risk is very low. It could be completely free for that person to use that SaaS tool. But the challenge of the SaaS company is how to hook that person and get them to actually use the software. Because their risk is, oh my gosh, someone's going to come in, they're going to use our software, they're not going to be engaged with it, they're going to leave, and we're never going to get a single penny out of the ad money that we spent to get them to, right? Now, in professional services, that's less of a problem because you're more sticky, right? So you're able to get them in. But just like a SaaS company will say the first day after you sign up, they'll give you an instruction video. They'll give you an instruction tutorial. They're going to do all these things to get you using their product right away. And so they're good at having those email campaigns afterwards. They might be a little annoying here or there, but they do them for a reason. Those email campaigns that are saying, have you tried this? The reason they're very aggressive is because they know even if it's slightly annoying to get that over communication, they know it's more likely to make you use their product, become a happy user of their product, continue using their product. And so in our case, though, again, going back to professional services, we instead need to say, what is going to happen next? What's going to happen after that? How is that going to, what things do you need to have ready for that next call? Just sharing, oversharing to the point that you might even think it's a bit annoying. That's okay. It's better to be slightly annoying and to be oversharing than to be undersharing.
I agree. Yeah. And even mention what potentially is not going to happen. Like if there's no phone call for the first week, say that. And just preemptively try to answer the questions your new client or prospective new client is going to have. It will definitely ease a lot of their uncertainty before committing to working with you for potentially years and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars with your firm.
Yeah, and it's a great point too. I know we had mentioned salespeople before, but remember, once they become a client, think about account managers if you have those or anything else. They should be using the same material. So this isn't something that you just put on your website and I published that. It's like, no, it's create that material so it can be used by everyone in your firm that is interacting with that client right after, because you want to make sure they have the most seamless process. So part of it, as you said, it's making it public so people can see it before they engage with you, but then using that same content after. It's going to be consistent, right? Because what they saw and they thought they were expecting, sure enough, they're getting those reminders after they've signed up to have the most enjoyable engagement with your firm.
Well, I guess we reached probably the end of this episode, Scott. Is there any other thing you would like to mention before we...
Well, I think the key here is just that this doesn't have to be a big initiative. A lot of these tips that we're talking about are quite simple, right? When you think about it, it is just about speaking the language of your audience, being clear about what you offer, the benefits it's having, being as trustworthy and out there as much as possible so they know who they're working with, and making it clear what actions to take. These are not, they're not mind-blowing things, but they're relatively simple, and I'd argue relatively simple to implement even. Mm-hmm. So the goal of this podcast is to give, business owners and leaders like yourself just action items that you can take. They don't have to be super complex. They're just straight to the point, and they might seem too simple to even have an impact, but they're so simple they actually do have an impact. And I just encourage you to start taking some action.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott, and thank you all for tuning in today. And feel free to leave a comment or send us suggestions and recommendations of topics you would like us to cover in the future. Thank you so much. Have a good day.